Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone on this chilly Sunday morning? Brisk, yes. Good to be with you. Good to see Brother Harold getting around good.
Yeah.
Our God answers prayer, don't he, brother?
Amen.
Brother, I hate to tell you, but in my mind, I'd wrote you off. You know.
Yeah. Well, Lord had
Yes, sir.
I don't plan to keep you here, but I think this is the reason.
I just tell you
Praise Him in the morning.
how little faith we have.
On this side. If I had another life,
Yeah. Our God answers prayer. I say that, but I'm always surprised when He does. I'm like, oh, He did hear me. Well, yeah, He hears me. He hears me every time. The problem is most of the time I pray amiss. I pray what I want. My will be done, not thy will be done.
He got you for that.
Yes, sir, He does.
And you don't want it.
He'll say, go out and cut your switch, as Daddy used to say. Yeah. Whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, brother. And that's it's chastening's grievous, but I have learned to thank Him that He does. I can't live like other people. I can't do it. Because if I could, this flesh would. And I'm learning to thank God that there's something that withholds that. Keeps me in the straight and narrow. That when I do veer off course, He paddles my backside and says, get back over here. And that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. I know y'all are curious. We've run out of 2 Samuel. And Mike said, I'd like for you to do something next time that I'll at least live long enough for you to finish. We've been in Samuel
I
since...
didn't say that, but I wish I had.
Yeah. We've been in Samuel since John says 1985, so I thought we'll do the book of Psalms. It's the shortest book in the Bible. No. We're going to go to Jonah. Jonah chapter 1. I was pacing back and forth studying yesterday, and Melissa said, you still don't know where you want to go, do you? I said, no, I'm still praying over it. I go out and study a little while and come back. And I kept coming back to this. I'm sure y'all have never heard this story before. It never gets old. And it's here as a reminder. Jonah is one of the 12 minor prophets, as they call it. And he was not minor in that he was insignificant. Just the volume and the number of chapters in the particular book here. And this book, the book of Jonah, has nothing to do with prophecy. Really. It's history. And it's not the first time Jonah's mentioned. It's been interesting studying this. And it's not the first time Nineveh's mentioned. Jonah's mentioned in 2 Kings 14. God used him to, by His word, and at the hand of Jonah, they restored the coasts of Israel. And Nineveh turns out to be a very wicked place. But again, back to the minor prophets here. Nahum, the burden of Nineveh came to Nahum. If you in Nahum 1 verse 1, that's what he says. And he speaks in chapter 3 of the wickedness that had gripped this town. And we're familiar, everybody here is familiar with what happens here. But I want us to look at this like we have Samuel. There'll be things we've seen that we've maybe never seen before, or maybe you have. They're here to remind us. They're here as examples for us. I see, again, in studying this, I see some of myself. I talked about that correction. Verse 1 here, now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it. For their wickedness is come up before me. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa. And he found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it, to go with them into Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. From the presence of the Lord. The thing most striking here, that song we just sang, I will arise. What's the first word in verse 2 there? Arise. I got to thinking in this. Brother Barrett, the first message I heard after we came here, the message he preached, the very first one I ever heard him preach, was, don't you want to know the God that saved you? He said most people, they claim they get saved and they reprobate out. They've got them a plaque on the wall that says, I made this confession on this Sunday at church. And then there's no personal relationship with their God. The word of the Lord, has the word of the Lord ever come to you? Has God ever spoken to you? We like to speak to Him. But what about when He does speak back? That's some personal reflection there, isn't it? Has God ever spoken to you like He has here to Jonah? The word of the Lord came to Jonah. How did I get here? How did I wind up at the dead end of a dirt road? I got on a plane in 2015 in Washington State, and the word of the Lord came and said, go to that church. See, I got to reflect, and when has God spoken to me, and did I obey? And when has God spoken to me, brother, and I didn't obey, and I endured some chastening? The word of the Lord came to me and said, go. And I obeyed, as Jonah did not do here. And what happened? Now, was the journey easy? We talked about, in closing out of 2 Samuel there, where David said he would not sacrifice anything to God that didn't cost him something. We have to take up our cross. Brother Donald likes to remind us of that. And there's a cross to bear here. There's sacrifices to be made. Like I said, I pray amiss because I don't want to pray out of sacrifice. I want God to give me, but I don't want to give Him. It becomes a one-sided relationship here. So has the word of the Lord ever came to you? Do you know, how well do you know your God? Is there a two-way conversation there? Now, God don't directly speak to me every day other than through His Word. I've got His Word here. I can go looking. But there are things and incidents like I've been searching since June of that year, and it was September when He finally showed up and said, go to that church at the end of the dirt road. But I had persistently sought Him for 3 months there almost. Persevered. My faith outlasted His silence. That was the very first devotion. I got up here, knees knocking, about to throw up. Looked like Susan was staring a hole in me from the back row back there. Yeah. Very intimidating. It takes something like to keep Joseph in line, you know. So. But I obeyed, I arose and went. And I thank God I did. Listen, there was a big temptation not to do it. Where I was at, my family was at. I was comfortable there somewhat. There was some strife there, and that was the reason I was seeking. But that path would have been easier. But it said, the second point here I want to make this morning, said he fled from the presence of the Lord, or attempted to flee from the presence of the Lord. Why are these pews not full this morning? People think, and growing up as a kid, a lot of times I thought the only place God was at church. A lot of the commentators, they kind of agree here that Jonah and a lot of the prophets thought that God's effect was only in the land of Israel. If they left the land of Israel, they wouldn't be under His hand anymore. Nineveh doesn't realize it, but they're sinning in the presence of an angry God. When I'm at home, I'm still in the presence of God. And I'm glad I am. We're fixing to leave and get in the car and drive down there to go on vacation. But the whole way there, no matter how far I go, I'm going to be in the presence of the Lord. And I better remember that. You know what? You know when it's easiest for me to sin? When I forget that. Do you think David would have went up on that rooftop and glared at Bathsheba and then took her if he'd have remembered? He later says that, I sinned in thy sight. In the presence of a holy God, he committed adultery. then in the presence of God schemed and killed her husband. Wow. Got quiet in here.
It's an ugly world.
It is. And I'm not preaching at y'all, I'm preaching with y'all. Listen, the one thing about this book here you'll see is not only does the audience need mercy, the preacher needs mercy. And he gets it. And the other thing we'll see here is God's reluctance to destroy the wicked. But there's one thing about it, he always uses a man. He will choose one out. And hey, I got to be in on it. I did not know what God had for me when the word of the Lord came to me that day on that plane. We was watching, there was some, I forget what Disney cartoon that was on the TV thing, and I was fixing to put my headphones in, and the Lord said, wait, got something for you. And I really, me and Melissa couldn't sit together. She had sat a few rows ahead of me there that day on that plane. And I didn't really get to tell her what I was going to do till we got in the car in Jacksonville. I said, the Lord's give me an answer here. I waited till we got all the way to Folkestone, and I was so brave about it. See, Mary, her husband needs prayer too. The presence of the Lord, the word of the Lord came to me. Listen, let's remember, we're going to go through these. I want to go slow like we've done before. Don't want to be in a hurry here. No reason to be. Let's look at what God has for us here. A lot of times we'll read this and say, I'll never do this. Listen, Jonah is one of the few prophets that's recorded that said no. I mean, he doesn't say he said no, but actions speak louder than words. A lot of times it's easy to be a Sunday morning Christian. What do we do Monday morning? Well, we're not at church. Well, the presence of the Lord is still there. Tuesday morning, I'm not at church. Guess what? The presence of the Lord is still there. I told y'all last time I was up here, and John and Donald have ribbed me hard about it, that I waited till 9 o'clock that morning before I even acknowledged God. But you know what? Or why that happened? The presence of the Lord was there. Restraining me. Reminding me. That was an instance where the word of the Lord came to me. Listen, I want us to reflect on two things. This is my point here this morning. I'll quit. Has the word of the Lord ever come to you? And are you acknowledging that you're in His presence 24/7? You know, when Mama was watching, I didn't stick my hand in the cookie jar. But when I thought she was watching, and see, I forget. Most of the time when we sin, we forget or we ignore that God is watching us. When Daddy seen me do something, He cut that switch. And that's what we're going to see here happens to Jonah in the coming verses. So this week, I covet your prayers as we travel. But let's be reminded that we're in the presence of a holy God that loves us, that keeps us straight, that never leaves us. Jesus cried out on the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? But you know what? I cannot say that. Because God said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And just because I go somewhere where I think I'm out of His presence, I'm not out of His presence. I love y'all. May the Lord bless you this morning.